Normally, in fall, bonsai drop their leaves. That is, if they are deciduous, of course. This Arakawa Maple is a deciduous bonsai, but we are in early December. The tree has not dropped its leaves. I'm going to defoliate it, then I'm going to prune it back, I'm going to look at wiring, and I'll treat it against algae and moss, because the bark is really delicate. About 2 weeks ago, there was a snowstorm coming. This tree was still in leaf, and I decided to put it in the shed. Therefore, it's been protected from the wind, it has been protected from the frost, and this tree has not made any speed in further dropping the leaves. It looks great, it's gorgeous as it is, but for the rest of winter. Now, why do bonsai drop their leaves? Normally the leaves, when they're green, they're solidly attached to the tree, and it is quite hard to get them off. However, in fall, the leaves, well, as you can see, they start falling by themselves. This is because the tree protects itself from winter damage by dropping the leaves. They take all the resources out of the leaves, which is why they turn color. So everything that's still useful, that they can relocate into the main tree, they do. Well, at some point, they have moved all the resources that they can, and then the tree starts to make a little cork layer between the end of the leaf and the start of the branch. Once that cork layer is in place and no more sap transport takes place, that is when the leaf naturally falls from the plant. As said, bonsai will drop their leaves naturally. So why do I help this tree now and defoliate? Well, it's quite simple. There's a few reasons for it. First of all, once it goes into winter storage and it sits between my other trees, I don't want all the leaves to sit on the pots, between the pots and everywhere. I just want clean pots so that no insect can hide in there, and in springtime I have less problems. Second, what you can tell really well now, with the leaves off, you can very clearly see the structure of the tree, you can see all the branches, and you can much better tell where do I need to prune. Also, I can find all the places where there's little dead stumps, and I can remove all of those, because those are at the risk of causing infection. Here we have one of those branches that is dead. Now, why do I have all these dead stumps here on the tree? Basically what I do in spring, I just let the tree grow. So I let the middle branch, the main branch, just extend for a bit. Then when the tree is nice and bushy, I prune back the main branch, basically just like this. What you then have left over is a tiny little bit of stem, which aids in these buds growing out, giving them strength before it all the way dries out. And then I get side branches. Summer growth is typically slower than spring growth. Therefore you get shorter internodes on them, and that aids in ramification. So you let the tree grow in spring, then you cut it back to buds, you leave a little stump, and then you get shorter internode growth over the summer. It doesn't always work. Look at this. This is a long internode, and in fact I don't like it at all, so it's going to go. But here you see short internode, and here I did the same thing in late summer. I pruned back again, but it didn't resprout, it didn't start growing again. But this is why you have all these little dead stumps. They're leftovers from summer and spring pruning of this year. I pruned it here earlier this year, and although there's a node here, it died back all the way here to this next node. So here I can just clip it off, and I grow through the whole tree, and I find points just like that. Like here there's another one, and I can just clip it off so that I don't get any further infection through here. I can clip it very short, but that would damage the edges here, so I'm just leaving a millimeter or so of the dead stuff. Here the same thing. This branch has died off, but what you see is a nice living bud here, and I can just prune it all the way back. Here another little stump that I want to get off. So here in the tree is a big pruning scar. At some point I'm going to have to clean this up more, but I haven't done it because these branches were quite weak. Now what you see is that I have got good extension growth from this year here at the ends. I do have little bits and bobs that are actually dead, but these I can now also prune back because I don't want the long extension growth. Now where do you prune back? Let me give you a little bit of a close-up here. So what you can see is that the first internode, so the distance between buds, here at this section, this is very short. But then we get a very long internode. This is actually counterproductive because we are high in the tree, and here we aim for very, very short internodes. So even though it's a waste of a lot of length, this is going to come off. Well, the same here. You have, this is reasonably short, this is reasonably short, and then you get a very, very long internode. So this is also a point to just clip it off. As you are clipping, leave again a little bit of space so that these buds don't dry out. In spring, you can always prune it back once it has died off. Now, as I was going through the tree, I saw this little branch, and this end looks dead, right? It is light brown instead of the red that you'd expect. But if you go up and up and up and up along the branch, you see that there's not a single living bud all the way to this fork. So what I'm assuming now is, well, this is for sure dead. But let me take another clipper. I think the whole branch is dead. Yeah, brown, this is all dead. So this I can prune back and then prune it flush with the main branch. I need to get my knob cutter for this, for cleaning this out. And you can see here also we had some cut paste on top. Here the wound has closed over already. So I'm using the length of the internode throughout the tree to decide whether I want to prune back or not. So this is where I pruned in spring. There's a little dead section here. There's a nice short side branch here also with a little bit of a pruning left over. This is reasonable, this is nice and short, but this is certainly way too long, so I'm going to just prune that back. Here again a very long section in the back. It's a bit of a pity that there's not a bud in here, but I'm just going to remove it because in the long term that creates better ramification. More sides where there were leaves means there's more sides where buds can grow. In between the nodes there will never be buds. So the shorter this distance, the more branches you can have on any section, and therefore ramification can be finer. It means you are pruning off quite a bit of material every once in a while, but hey, that's just part of the process. You prune it, you let it grow, and you prune it again. When pruning, there is a third thing that I'm looking for. So the first is, of course, everything that's dead I'm removing and pruning back. Then I'm looking for short internodes, and everything that's long I'm pruning back. And the third one are situations like this. You can see here, this is the natural growth habit of a Japanese maple. There's a continuation of the main branch, and then there is two side branches. I prefer to have just one side branch on the continuation or just the two side branches, because otherwise you get a three-way split, which often leads to swellings. You can actually see it here already, it is clumping up a little bit. Now, which one do you remove? That's always difficult. Well, first of all, I look at the length of the internode. This one has the shortest internode on the first section of these. So one of these two has to go. Then I'm looking at the direction. So this branch is going into this direction. If I remove this side branch, then the continuation is straight. But all the trees have lots and lots of movement. So it is more logical to remove the middle one and continue with this side branch. Now here, further up along the branch, you have the same situation. Once again, a side branch, and a continuation. Now, just looking at the length of the internode, this has a short internode, this has a short internode, and this has a longer internode. But if I then look at the length of the branch in comparison to everything that's happening here, this is starting to get fairly long. Although this is also long. No, I'm just going to go with what I said before. I'm just going to remove this side branch here. What it does now, I have a branch here coming up which fills this space a little bit, and I have two side branches to work with for the next year. So now this branch is ready for this year. I could consider wiring it a little bit down so it gets a natural sloping shape. It is always good to look at your tree every once in a while in the broader picture as you are pruning it. You see that there's a nice layering of branches, and if I just wire this a little bit more into position and this one a little bit more here, then I get a very, very nice profile already. This tree is developing quite well. I'm quite happy with it, considering how a year ago I was wondering whether it survived the winter. I wired it out this spring when it was healthy, and now I'm just working on back budding, ramification. A branch like this will need to be wired out just like that to fit more in profile. And now you can see that here on top the branches are actually quite long. They are almost broader than the lowest branch here. So I'm going to have to look at this area and prune it back. But before I do, I really need to defoliate this part of the tree as well, because then I can really examine the whole structure of the whole tree in total, because this tree has a very, very odd branch structure. Right, so almost all the leaves are gone. Let's take a broader view. Now I know you're watching this video and you might not have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, why don't you? Then you'll get updates and you'll find this channel again. If you have subscribed, thank you so much. If you like this video, pop that like button. It really helps me to reach a broader audience. So now that all the leaves are off, let me flip this tree around, because this really is not the front of the tree. This is going to be roughly the front of my tree. And what you can tell, this trunk, as I said, it doesn't really fit the tree. Why doesn't it not fit the tree? Well, first of all, the tree it's thick, but it's not very thick. The side branch actually competes now with the main trunk. They are roughly of equal size. Next to that, this branch grows up all the way to the height of the upper canopy. Therefore, again, this part of the crown competes with this part of the crown. Now, there is a few things that I could do. One of them would be remove this completely. Well, if I were to remove it, it becomes a very one-sided tree. I like to have a big Arakawa maple without very big cutting scars that looks well balanced. So for me, that is not an option. But if you're at home and you have a situation like this, cutting this one off might be an option. The alternative would be to cut this one off. Again, a very one-sided, unbalanced tree. I really don't like that. Then I could cut it all the way down. Now, if you look at this, cutting it all the way down means that you only have this branch left. Or maybe you get this one. But this thickness I am not going to lose when I cut off a part of the crown. So for me, cutting this down is not an option. So what are the other options? Well, one of the other options, and the one that I'm going for right now, is I say, well, this is going to be my main trunk line, and I'll need to decide which of these two is going to be the main trunk. And I'm just going to let the tip grow. I'm going to make a tree that is this tall, almost equally wide, but this canopy needs to come and grow over here. That means that when I'm pruning, I'm going to leave this alone as much as possible. This tree sits in my garden and I want it to look nice as much as possible. It is sitting in a bonsai pot. I might at some point put it in a little bigger pot or let a few roots escape to aid in the big growth that I need. But still, I want this to look nice. This has been in a bonsai pot for over 30 years. The previous owner unfortunately didn't address this problem at the time. But well, that doesn't mean that I'm going to completely cut back on this tree. I'm just going to let it run. I'm going to slowly develop a new setup. Now, as always, branches in the upper canopy grow much stronger than the branches lower down. So therefore, here it is always good to be quite assertive in your pruning. Leave less than you think you want to, because these grow so strong, they will otherwise dominate the lower branches. So here I'm taking off quite a bit of length, reducing these. Here is a nice little short side branch, and I'm just taking the whole thing off right at the base so that this can take over with short side branches. This one as well, it is quite long. It is starting to cork over with a nice side, but I'm just thinning it out considerably because this is not to dominate this tree. This is going to be the upper canopy, so this should grow a little bit slower. This of course doesn't look all that nice later on in the year, but it is a tree that I'm resetting, rebuilding, and therefore I am taking off quite a bit of the ramification, keeping this nice and light. This is going to help fatten the tree here, so I'm going to leave this more in place. But a branch like this that is growing that direction, it doesn't really help, so it's going to go just like that. So now this is a lot thinner. This actually is not needed here either. And it's ready for another growing season here. I don't need to do all that much more. Another nice light side branch, just like that. Now what we see here in the top is that there's a fairly strong branch growing out and up, and in the back there is a very nicely well positioned young, much thinner branch. I don't really need this heavy branching, because here you see that all the branches are quite fine at this level, so this I can remove without any concerns. This is up high in the tree and it will regrow nice branches very quickly. Now with the main pruning done, it's time to clean up the bark. As said before, I don't like moss on the bark. In this case the moss is on quite loose, and just a little piece of wire is already enough to gently peel away the moss here from the bark. Naturally you can also grab a pair of tweezers, but I'm now working on the tree. My tweezers are somewhere inside in a box. Don't feel like looking for them. This just works as well. I could of course now treat the bark again with anti-algae, but this tree is going to stay well sheltered from rain because I really don't want a lot of moss and algae development on this. Okay, this is now all clean. So this is enough to just stop the moss from crawling up the trunk over winter. And in spring, when I do the repot, I'll do a full clean of the bark and the trunk, and then I'll treat again with anti-algae. Let's take a bit of wire. Wiring out trees in the middle of winter is okay, as long as you make sure that they don't get massive frost anymore. So if I put intense bend here in this branch, a lot of damage occurs within the branch. That means that if it then freezes, water can expand and the branch can partially die off. So what I'm going to do is just light wires and just make small corrections, like moving this branch a little bit out, moving this branch a little bit down. This is going to be the new leader of my tree, I have decided. So this eventually will fall. I'll leave it right now, but this needs to come up a little bit more. I'll wire this one out and I'll wire that one out so that this gets the chance to expand a little bit more. I'm not going to do much more than that. What I have here, I have all sorts of old wire. These are my bits and bobs. If I unwire and I think it is still useful, then I just pop it in here and then I grab these small little pieces of wire to wire out these sort of branches. So I'm using fairly thick wire here, so I can leave it on quite loose. As said, I'm not going to make massive thick bends. I'm just going to do gentle readjustments, so not to put too much pressure on the branch. So just something like this is enough to put it just in a slightly different angle. Naturally, for small adjustments, just in vertical direction, what you can do, you take one of the roots and you try to loop a piece of wire underneath it, connect it to itself. So it's really just a simple loop. You bring it up to the branch that you want to move. I just use a piece of rubber tubing, put it over the wire so it doesn't put too much pressure on the branch, and then you just bring the branch down into the position that you'd like, putting this tension wire over the branch, and that way reposition the branch vertically. Looking at the tree in profile, this sticks out quite a bit and it's also quite a lot stronger than the branches surrounding it, so I'm just going to remove it, adding to taper and making sure this profile doesn't grow out too much. I don't know if you can hear, but in the background somebody has started to use a chainsaw or a leaf blower or whatever. That means for me it is time to finish off. Fortunately, this tree is done for now. You see it is nicely distributed in branching. This is the highest point of the tree, which is also the branch that I'm going to let extend for the year. Here I've thinned out considerably to weaken it. I've cleaned off the moss. I've pruned back all the branches. All that I still need to do is put a little bit of pruning paste on the bigger cuts. And then it is going to be out of the rain for this tree, because I don't want this bark to get soft or rotten, or I don't want to get any moss on there. This one I'll protect from the rain a little bit, and it's ready for spring. Later this season, March, I'll do an update. I'll repot this tree. I might put it in a slightly bigger pot to get extensive growth. Next to that, I have a whole bunch of cut off branches that I pruned out. And what am I going to do with it? You might have seen my video on winter cuttings. If you haven't, I'll pop a link down below. I'm going to put these in a pot and see whether they'll root till spring. But for now, this is it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.